Greetings fellow guitar travellers, it's Rowan J. Parker here and welcome to episode 1 of Music Theory 101. Now I've been teaching guitar for well over 20 years and one of the biggest problems I come across and one of the things I get asked about the most is music theory. Now there is a huge amount of ignorance and misunderstanding about all things theoretical out there in the guitar world, and unfortunately guitarists are probably by far and away the worst culprits when it comes to not understanding the language of music, and sometimes willfully. For instance, a very typical response I've had from rock guitar players is that they don't want to understand all that theory stuff because it'll somehow make them a worse musician, because it'll stifle their creativity or something like that. And I'm just here to reassure you that that's absolutely not true. You cannot help but to improve as a musician if you actually understand the language you're trying to speak better. So I've created these lessons as an attempt to present in an easy to understand, friendly, digestible way all the aspects of music theory that you're going to need as a guitar player, whether it's professional or just playing for a hobby. So this will range from the incredibly simple, incredibly basic, some of which stuff you may know, through to quite abstract and abstruse concepts. So it should be a lot of fun. It's one of the things I'm really interested in music theory, and especially things like harmony. So today's lesson is looking at the origin of chords. We play these chords on the guitar all the time, but where did these chords actually come from? What is a chord? How did we end up with the vast number of chords that we have today? So it's a little bit of music history we're going to give you. The development of the chord, the origin of the chord, the genesis of the chord, if you like. So let's get straight down to it. Music Theory 101, Episode 1, the origin of the chord. Now it could well be that music is as old as the human race itself. Modern humans have existed for about 200,000 years, and there's quite good evidence that music has formed a part, an integral part of all the societies of ancient peoples. We know, for instance, certainly that music was a constituent of people that lived 20,000 years ago, because we've dug up artifacts, percussion instruments, and also instruments that played melodic lines from that period. So music is very, very ancient. By contrast, chords are a really recent invention. Chords only stretch back about 1,000 years. Now that seems like a long, long time by the gauge of our lifespan, but if we think that music has possibly existed for as much as 200,000 years, it's only 0.5% of the total time we've had music. So in terms of geological time, basically chords arrived last Tuesday, as it were. They're an incredibly recent invention. So how did we get from simple single line, single note melodies to the vast and rich harmony that we have today? Well, the story begins about 1,000 years ago, so here we go. Okay, if we have a group of people and we give them a melody to sing, what will tend to happen is they will tend to sing the same melody all together. So let's imagine this is our melody. If everybody sings the same melody all together, that's called unison. So you can imagine a big crowd singing la da 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 da, which could sound really massive if there was enough of us. And you can hear this sort of thing even today in things like football stadium, where they have a crowd chant and everybody sings the same thing in unison all together. However, this melody is what's called monophonic, because everybody is singing the same thing. Now that can produce really bold and effective results, and if you listen to music from other cultures around the world, this is still very much how melodies are performed. Everyone sings the same melody together and they produce a massive unified sound. One of the major breakthroughs that happened about 1,000 years ago was the realization that men and boys, or men and women, their voices are naturally 1 octave apart. So if you had, for instance, a mixed voice choir of men and boys all singing the same melody, they would naturally be 1 octave apart, in which case you would get this sort of sound. Which to our ear sounds incredibly bare and basic, but you must realise at the time this was a major innovation and helped the choirs of the day to sound a lot more wide and massive. And the same is also true if you have men and women singing together, their voices will tend to be an octave apart. However, at this period in history, the study of music, the formal study of music, was really the province of the church, and women were certainly not allowed. It's an attitude you still see prevailing today, unfortunately. But it was choirs of men and younger boys singing together that produced the first major breakthrough in the development of harmony. Now, this sort of music you can still hear today. It's Gregorian chant or plain song. One of the major innovations in plain song was when somebody had the very bright idea of, instead of just everybody singing the same melody, even if it were just octaves apart, what would happen if somebody sang the principal and then somebody sang a different note, 5 notes up the scale? Now this seems like such an obvious thing to do, that we just don't sing the same note, but at the time it was an absolutely revolutionary concept that instead of everybody singing everything all together the same, some people would sing one melody and some people would sing something a bit different. And this is exactly what happened. And we got this system where melodies were harmonised in perfect parallel fifths. And that is a system of harmonisation called organum, and you find it all over the place in Gregorian chant and in plain song, and it has a particularly beautiful and bare sound to it. Which has got its own stark loveliness. So if you've not listened to any Gregorian chant, go and check some out, because it is incredibly profound, some of it, and it's a sound that I like a lot. However, by our standards today, it's still an incredibly basic and sort of, unsophisticated sort of sound. But again, going back to the period this was being developed in, it was revolutionary. So we could get to the stage where we had choirs singing the principal, and then a fifth above, and then perhaps younger boys singing the melody at the octave. So we had this sort of span of harmonisation, which helped again everything sound even wider. Now this state of affairs persisted for a long time, until some genius had the idea of what would happen if we put a note in between. So we've got our first and we've got our fifth. What happens if we stick a note in the middle? Boom. And lo and behold, the major triad had just been invented, and that is fundamentally where our most basic chord, the triad, comes from. It's just an expansion of the root and the fifth, with the insertion of the third in the middle. Now, the invention of the triad had profound influence and impact upon the development of Western music in Europe, and led to the creation of all sorts of much wider harmonic sounds, and the repercussions of this very early invention are still being felt today as people continue to push harmony further and further and further. So that is where the major triad comes from. It's basically an invention of some very ancient monks. So now you know. Okay, well that just about wraps it up for our first episode of Music Theory 101, which is the origin of the chord. We hope you found this useful and interesting, and it's filled in some of your knowledge. I love this sort of stuff. It's fascinating to find out about the origins of music, and we hope you enjoy it as well. Before I sign off, I'd like to encourage you to have a look at my website, which is www.rowanjparker.com, for all your guitar playing needs. There's everything from very simple beginner material to absolutely insane shred on that site, and most of the stuff on the site is absolutely free. And you can also subscribe to my site by sticking your email address into the subscribe box, hitting subscribe. You get even more free stuff. If you're interested in guitar lessons or music theory lessons or anything like this, I do lessons via Skype, and you can request information on my website for that. Okay, well I think that will do for this lesson, the origin of chords, and we'll see you next week where we'll be looking at the major scale and where we get all the chords that we use today from. That's next week's lesson, so for this week, farewell, goodbye.